Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Ron Karr. Ron, hey, how are you?
I'm great, Mindy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. All the better for seeing you and talking to you today.
Absolutely. Same here.
So we're talking about thoughtful leadership today, and I know you're a thoughtful guy. We've known each other a long time. So tell us your definition of thoughtful leadership.
Well, thoughtful leadership is you have an idea where you want to go, and then also you're thinking ahead as to how you're going to get there, and how are you going to enroll others to support you. So it's really taking the time to look at the big picture. One of the things that some leaders, first of all, let's define what a leader is if we can. Okay. A leader is not just somebody who has a title, right? Because there's lots of people who are managers who are not really effective leaders, right? A leader is someone who pushes the envelope to move to a new direction, understands what it takes to get there, and also ensures people have what they need to help him or her get there. Now, one interesting thing about thoughtful leadership is that if you're really going to lead others, you have to have a high degree of empathy. But at the same token, what you have to have is you have to have the understanding that people do things for themselves, not for you. So how are you going to think ahead as to how you're going to enroll others and get them to want to participate and help you? Because leaders understand one thing. They do a couple of things. Number one, they understand that they can only go so far through the efforts of themselves. They go a lot further through the efforts of others. Number two, they understand that people do things for themselves, not for you. And then number three, one of the things that they are really comfortable in, that a lot of people are not, they're comfortable not having the answers on how to move forward. And that may sound like a contradiction, but it's not. When you think about it, if I'm as a leader and I'm brought in to lead an organization to a new level, let's say, and we haven't been there, we don't have the answers. The job of the leader is not to have all the answers. The job of the leader is to find the people who have the answers and help them get there.
So you're speaking from experience, and this is really great information, Ron. Thank you for sharing. How did you come to these insights? Was it in a logical way, or was it the School of Hard Knocks?
Those two plus my experience as a child. So, I had to learn really at an early age, what it meant to take an argument and align it to my father. So, it was a tough upbringing, the Holocaust and all that. A lot of people that came out of the Holocaust kind of damaged, a lot of PTSD. And so they actually create an abusive environment, not because they don't love the child, but because they'll do anything in their lives to prevent the child from having the experience they had. So there was nothing that was done that was right. There was a lot of verbal and physical abuse, not sexual. And at the end of the day, for just doing one little thing, like making a little mistake and spilling a drop of milk on a counter can lead to an eruption that you would never have with a child today. So I had to find ways to always create an argument that would get my father to align with me and avoid the unpleasantness, if you will, of some of the behavior that he used to try and get me to toe the line. So I learned that at an early age, okay? But I also learned empathy at an early age because when you're going through something like that, it's very easy to tell yourself a story that someone hates you or, whatever comes up to you. But what I learned through several years of reflection in myself is that we create those stories. My father did whatever he did for his own reasons. All right. And then I receive it, and then I create a story. And then from that story, I move forward in life thinking what I can and cannot do. And many times our stories are limiting. But what real leaders know is that when a story comes into their mind as to what they think the situation is or what they think people are doing to them, they also realize it's just a story. And who wrote the story can change the story. So I learned that at an early age, and it set me up for my career. It allowed me to think 5 steps ahead because I always had to. So my value when I go into my clients is, they'll throw the strategies at me and so forth. And I'm thinking 5 steps ahead, and I'm saying, but wait a minute, there's red flags here, here, here. Do you think about those? And that's where I bring velocity to my clients' lives, because I have them see things in different perspectives that they haven't seen or thought about. That was developed in my early childhood.
That is an incredible link that you've made for us. And thank you for being so open, so vulnerable. We never know what people are going to share on this show. And I think people appreciate getting to hear the real story about a real.
Sure. Now, I do that for 2 reasons, okay?
Go on.
I do that, number one, and the book that I just wrote, The Velocity Mindset, is like that. It's got story, not just about me, other people, but in influence, which a leader has to do. There are 2 parts of the body you look at, the heart and the mind. So if a leader wants you to do something and they start telling you what they want you to do and how they want you to do it, that's a mindful conversation. That's where you're analyzing, does it make sense for me or not? You can't lead with that because it doesn't land with impact. You have to lead with the heart, the emotional connection. And what leaders don't understand is that vulnerability sells. Now, vulnerability, not for the sake of you doing therapy for yourself in front of others. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about vulnerability. So at the end of the time, people can understand and say, wow, this person's been through some stuff. They understand what I'm going through. I get it. I want to talk to them. All right. They understand me. That's the concept of vulnerability. I'll give you an example. I had a speech impediment when I was a young kid. I could not enunciate the letter R. And why some genius decided to name that condition with a word that starts with a letter I can't pronounce, I can't tell you. But the condition was called rhoticism, whereas I can only call it oticism. Now, on top of that, to be given the name Ron Karr, I was set up for failure since the day I was born. So there's a lot of ribbing. I call it, bullying, because when you can't enunciate your name, kids can be rather, difficult, let's say. So I had to go and get it taken care of, and I did. But at that time, I never even thought in my mind about being a professional speaker because I couldn't even say my name. And 40 years later, I'm inducted as the 40th president of the National Speakers Association. So when I was practicing for that speech, that was a big speech for me, one of my colleagues said, address the elephant in the room. I said, what? And she goes, your accent. So I said, how are we going to address it? Being an obnoxious New Yorker, how are we going to do it? So I crafted a story around my impediment. And I'm a business guy, Mindy. I came from business, hardcore business results, bottom line. So this idea of vulnerability in 1995, when I'm 88, when I'm starting out, that was fluff to me. No one does that. Boy, was I wrong. When I did that speech and I pulled that story out in the beginning about my impediment, and then I did it for a group of CEOs, I was flabbergasted at the response. I can't tell you how many CEOs walk up to me at the end of the day and say, I went through that exact thing. Now think about it. When you're vulnerable and they get that emotional connection, now they're open to listening to your ideas. But people won't listen unless you have that emotional connection. That's why vulnerability sells.
Thank you for that reminder. We talk about the head and the heart a lot here. And I think the concept of vulnerability and the word itself have come up a few times. However, I wonder what you think about people who are vulnerable. I mean, we all are vulnerable. It's whether we share it or not. And why you think some people think they're thoughtful leaders, but they're kind of behind a shell or a mask. I mean, why do people do that?
Because of their insecurities. We're all insecure to a degree. And also, if they're not confident in why they're doing it and how to do it. To make it a simple example, you have someone in a factory, let's say, working, right? and you see a lot of good in them, but they're screwing up, but they're not paying attention, let's say, right? And you keep going in and say, hey, pay attention. How's that going to work? That's like a kid, a parent telling a kid, clean your bed, make your bed or something, right? We don't listen to that because, it's not about us. There was no vulnerability. There was no connection. But if they understand that the vulnerability is not so much to expose themselves, but to make the person that they're talking to feel like, hey, they walked in my shoes. They're here to help me. So you go back to that example, then you say, hey, I want to share a story about when I was your age working this machine. I came in here and I was so cocky, and I do everything. And I realized, after about 5 years, I said, man, what gave me the right to do that? I'm making so many mistakes. I'm surprised that they still had me. But I was fortunate to have someone who really understood me. And I made my dedication to myself that I would pay it back. So what I'm doing right now is because I care about you and I want to see you excel. And then you link it to their motivation. So I was in the CEO's office one time. A supervisor came in, all upset. I said, what's wrong? Guy's late in the job, 20 minutes. I said, what? And he's on a cell phone. What'd you do? Told him to get off the damn cell phone. What did he say? Everybody else is on a cell phone. What'd you do? Walked away in a huff. How'd that serve you? I said, go back. What does he want to do? He wants to be a master welder. What do you need? Quality and timeliness. How's his quality? Great. Go back and say to him and say, look, you want to be a master welder. Your quality is great. He's just a little behind his job. What can we do to get you back on time so you get that master welder certificate? And all of a sudden that person started coming up with the ideas themselves. And there was no use of the cell phone. Vulnerabilities are about building a bridge. About building a bridge of emotional connection that links people together so they want to take an interest in each other and hear each other, or listen to each other, I'd rather say.
Yeah, thank you. I think your insights and your stories together make such great listening. I hope our listeners are enjoying Ron Karr. We've got more to come. I just want to remind everybody to look at the show notes. Make sure you look him up, connect with Ron, follow him, check out his books. There's a lot that we can learn from the guests, and we can only do so much in 22.5 minutes on average. So back to the interview. Ron, you sound like you've really got it all together. You have so many lessons and stories. And are you willing to share a story with everybody where you got it wrong or made an error of judgment? Anything from your life?
I was brought in by this company. Now, I already worked with several divisions, and I became like a rock star because I was helping them close real big deals with certain key accounts. And so this one division brought me in. It was a chemical manufacturer. And it was a commodity that they were selling. And they were selling to a huge multinational. And that multinational was 30% of the demand. And that multinational was ruthless in procurement. They kept cutting price. So when they brought me in, they said, we can't do this anymore. We're not making a living. And I said, okay. So they had a new bid coming up for an additional piece of business that my client wanted to make up for the lost revenues, but at a valued price. So I went in and we worked the strategy, and they went. And after 3 months, not only did they not get that bid, they lost the entire business. They were given 9 months notice. And I go, oh my Lord. I felt, because you live and die for your clients, you live for their successes, but you also suffer for their defeats. And the guy called me up. I called him up and I said, it was a VP. It wasn't a good career move for him. And I said, so tell me something, I feel awful. He goes, don't feel awful. I said, why? You didn't create this situation. I brought you in here to make sure that we didn't leave any stone unturned, and we did not. There's a silver lining here, Ron. We lost this business, but it's forcing us to figure out how to do it right. Imagine we waited 9 more months and then lost it. We wouldn't have had that time to figure it out. Now, his career got bumped a little bit, but he was a leader who knew he had to do what it took, even if it meant failure for himself. You put the organization ahead. So that was a failure that I still considered a failure to myself because it didn't work. I'm comfortable that we did everything right, but still, you don't like to lose. No one likes to lose, right? Now, on a personal side, I can tell you one that really took me out of the speaking business. If you ever hire a speaker and say they never bombed, run from that speaker. Because like anybody else, we have our good days and bad days, like athletes. And that same company, another division, didn't bring me into the national sales meeting like they all did. They waited till December to bring me in because they had to push a price increase out the door. And they were bringing me in to teach them how to do that. I didn't do my due diligence properly, Mindy. So what I didn't know is I was set up for failure. I'm brought in. The new national sales manager is a young kid who just got promoted. So he's more worried about his reputation with his peers. The sales team is pure veterans, been there, done it. And what I didn't know is this division was the only division out of the 5 that was making money. So they were paying for everybody else, and they felt underappreciated. So now here comes this expert who's going to teach them how to sell a price increase, right? So I would do role plays because I think role plays is a great way to see things, experiential. Well, at that time for me, a role play was, okay, let's see how you do it. And then I give my opinion and I critique it. But I critiqued it out of love, but obviously it wasn't received like that because I'm embarrassing people. I was young. Well, Mindy, when I got the evaluations for that program, I'm from New York. Right? We hear curse words, but there were curse words in that evaluation that I didn't even know what they meant. And I remember going into my car in a parking lot and I was totally destroyed. I'm no good. What makes you think? My father came up, wait till they see you're a fraud. It was all coming up, because we get triggered. Someone says something to you, it triggers you and all your past stories and everything else. So I knew immediately, the longer I stayed in that rut, the worse it was going to get. I had to get myself out of it. So I'm asking myself in the car, who can I call? Who do I value? I actually called the client because this client and I became good friends for life. He understood me, I understood him. And I said, Bud, I need to talk to you offline. He goes, okay, what's up? And I said, I'm putting my vulnerability here because it may make you never hire me again, but so be it. I value your opinion. And I explained what happened. And the first thing he said to me is what I always do for others, but I couldn't do for myself. What did you learn from this? Because we all fail in life, Mindy. The most successful people have failed more than they succeeded. The question is not did you fail, but what did you learn? And I told him at that time, I have no clue. Because I was in an emotional cortisol. He goes, think about it. Well, that moment led me to redesign the role play where now it's the most popular thing on my speeches. What I realized is I don't have to be the hero. That's not my job. I'm the messenger. So now when I bring 2 people up, they create the scenario, they do it. I take one person aside and I say, just ask this one question differently and see if we change the conversation. They go do it. And then I ask the audience, what was the transformation? What did you see? And then I interview the 2 of them. So they become the heroes. They show the transformation. There's no criticism of anybody. If anything, they're walking away as heroes and it becomes the most popular part. That wouldn't have happened if I didn't fail that day.
So this is so brilliant. I wish we could speak for hours. You whispered in that person's ear, so you weren't sort of giving advice, in public, right? That's what you're saying?
But I also understood what my role was in their role.
Yeah.
Never, ever make anybody in the audience feel that they were insulted or anything. Because then the audience would just support them and come on you. And that's not your job. Your job is to make people feel good. So that's how I redesigned it.
So that is thoughtful leadership. And the thoughtful leader doesn't always get it right. The thoughtful leader can take a step back and reflect. And, that's what it's all about. That's what we talk about here. So where do you believe more thoughtful leadership is required today in business or in society at large?
It's required in any situation where you are leading the conversations and the actions to get to a new result. Okay. It could be a coach. In athletics, it could be a CEO. It could be a manager. It could be a parent. It could be a friend who's being called in to help a friend through a disaster situation.
Okay. That's, we have probably time for one more. So I would like you to make the link for everybody between velocity and vulnerability, 2 V words. And, velocity obviously is in the title of your book. We've spoken a lot about vulnerability and opening up. And I thank you again for opening up here on the show. How do those 2 things fit together? Because they're both important skills, right?
Right. So the title is called The Velocity Mindset, How Leaders Eliminate Resistance, Gain Buy-in, and Achieve Better Results. Those are the three things that a leader needs to have and produce. If you don't produce better results, people will stop following you. You need to get buy-in. So vulnerability, as we discussed, is quite frankly a way to get an emotional connection. And it's story-based, story sell. The thing about velocity that people don't understand is that velocity, if I ask you, Mindy, what's the word that comes to your mind when I say velocity, what is it?
Speed.
Speed, but that's not velocity.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you have, you get burnout. Because a lot of people are task-oriented. Let me get done my to-do list, to do it. And at the end of the day, you're so exhausted, but you ask yourself, what did I really accomplish? And you didn't accomplish what you wanted. That's not velocity. Velocity is purpose-based, the end in sight, and making sure that everything you're doing is dedicated to that. So the link to velocity and vulnerability is simply to have velocity, you have to have speed with direction. You know where you want to go. Now, how do you enroll others? That's the vulnerability part, to get them emotionally enrolled to want to follow you and help you get there. And that's hard doing the two together.
That is fantastic. And I know people want to read the book and get all the depth of your message in there and connect with you, as I say. I can't thank you enough. It's been fantastic talking to you today, Ron. I'm sure there's lots more where that came from. How can people find you?
If they just go to velocitymindset.com, they'll get to my website and they'll find all the information on what we do and how they can get access to the information we just discussed again.
Thank you again for being on this show, and we'll see you again soon.
My pleasure, Mindy. Have yourself a great day.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.